Remember that scene in The Last Crusade where Indiana Jones stands at the edge of that deep ravine with no bridge in sight?
One of my favorite scenes.
It's to save his father, and he has to gather his courage and step into the abyss. And only after he takes the step does the path appear beneath his feet. And right now, humanity is standing at that ravine. The old world is breaking apart, and the bridge to the new one hasn't appeared yet. I'm Terry Hasty.
And I'm Haydn Hasty.
On this episode of Becoming You, we are talking about that leap of faith. We'll explore the 5 ways to upgrade your internal hardware and how to create an umbilical cord to the transcendent so that you aren't just pulled along by the collective, but leading the way as a pioneer of the soul. In the first episode of this trilogy, we discussed the stage of ignorance. It's the stage of the Kali Yuga and the violent, actually aggressive darkness that's enveloped the world. We talked about the role of the collective and the role of the individual. And in doing so, we really tried to explore and express the difficulties we face as we move from the stage of ignorance to the middle zone.
Which is what this episode is about.
And Hayden, this is really par for the course for you and me, that as we've started our business 30 years ago, we've always been a little bit out on the edge, maybe on the frontier. So there may be things that we talk about that you haven't heard before or that maybe make you raise an eyebrow, but that's okay. It's like when we started with emotional intelligence and the leadership development work that we did even 30 years ago. Nobody else was really doing any work in that. And when you studied suggestive accelerative learning and teaching out of Bulgaria, that was a very progressive way of teaching and of helping people learn. And even our work in integrity, I even had doubts about that because that was new back 25 years ago. And that's what this work now in consciousness is also on the edge. It's not, as we said, it's not about talking about current events, politics, personalities, all that. It's talking about this higher way of looking at ourselves, of existence, and of a conscious life.
Many of the things that appear to be somewhat strange today in discussing, particularly what we have to talk about here in the middle zone, will be much more commonplace. I don't know. I'm going to take a guess. I'm not a soothsayer, but I would say 5 to 7 years, assuming that we survive the age of ignorance. You know, that's
right. Which is really best understood by, rather than being, as I find myself many times, being in such resistance to it, but by accepting that it is a necessary part of our evolution. The objective is the exhaustion of the old forms, things that have to die away, have to break apart. And you could say the decline or breaking apart of ignorance is happening so new forms can be born. And it's sad we have to learn this way, but it tends to be the way that we learn individually and collectively is through catastrophe or destruction.
And I remember almost specifically in my own life when that particular day came and I said to myself, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to learn this way anymore. There has to be a different path other than suffering and loss.
And that's what we're talking about
and
today.
That's the sad part of this. You know, this is how we learn, particularly as a collective. The middle zone, which the age of ignorance will lead to, really could be on the horizon, even the possibility that it's taking place right now. And I'm not saying that it is, but the middle zone also contains its difficulties. The middle zone is a bridge from the old to the new, but the problem is it's a bridge that we haven't crossed before. You might even think of it as a testing ground because we're being forced to examine our existence and life on this planet. The materialism, the scientific fields, seems like just dozens and dozens of psychological platforms, the political and judicial systems that cannot solve our problems. And as a result, we're being forced inward.
And I want to get into that being forced inward part. That's the main point. But when you talked about the middle zone being a bridge from the age of ignorance, it made me think of that scene in Which one is it? The Last
Last
Crusade? Last
Crusade.
Crusade in
I knew
Indiana.
what you were gonna say.
And Indiana Jones has to cross that deep ravine and save his, father's life, but, of course, there's no bridge, there's no way to get across. He has the clues, but he doesn't know how to fulfill that part of the journey, so he just has to gather his courage and his faith, and he steps into the abyss. You remember that?
And because the bridge is there, but it's
Right.
not visible.
And when his foot lands where there is no path, suddenly, not only does he feel the path beneath his feet, but he sees the path stretching out before him for his safe passage. And so part of this is having to take the step before we see the path. And I
And
also love he throws the rocks out to remind or to let everybody else see where the
it's a
path is.
perfect analogy for the
Yeah.
middle zone because we're going to have to take those initial steps before the path begins to reveal itself. But, that's not unlike other times in each individual's life where you had to do the same thing. So there are a lot of potential problems here in the middle zone. And one of those, of course, is overriding the old mental stuff in order to begin this path into the spiritual.
Well, of course, at this stage, like all of them in the human experience, the ego's still alive and vying for control. So while spirituality is coming to the forefront and is being considered as an alternative to old models, and I think more and more people are seeking deeper meaning. I have conversations all the time that just pop up where people say that this pressure is forcing them into, like, I need more God, I need more something of depth.
Well,
So
this is one of the problems of the middle zone is where am I going to go to find that? And of course, the answer is there, but that's not what this episode is about. We'll come to that, but not in this
well, I think
episode.
even in this longing for inner stability and a greater connection to the divine, whatever your
To
word is for
God,
that, right? Is still there's the danger of being ruled and governed by the ego, by those old J-bops of judgments, beliefs, opinions, and perceptions, old patterns. But as we begin to make progress, we're likely to witness a very strong increase in spiritual experiences like visions, ideas, how the world can be improved on a more spiritual plane rather than just through the material. And people are feeling more connected, and even people talk about there's an awakening going on. We're already seeing that.
one of the problems that we'll also witness in the middle zone will be, I just simply refer to them as false teachers. Not that the past and history hasn't been filled with them, but that is going to be one of the dangers that we all face in moving into the middle zone because these will be people that are capitalizing on these events, following the instruction through their ego. So there'll be a lot of people who are vulnerable, as we are witness to in the age of ignorance. There'll be many people that are vulnerable to anyone promising a shortcut, a quick fix, another dogmatic belief system, or, a chicken in every pot, of what Scar, says in Lion King, to
Yeah.
take over as being king. There'll be a tendency for many false teachers to return or attempt to return to the old stuff, or even materialism itself as a substitute for true spirituality, kind of like examples like what we've seen in the past, like the preaching the prosperity gospel.
And I'm
So,
sure some will come to mind as are coming to mind for me, but again, we're staying away from personalities. They always run their course, of course, after exploiting people who are just seeking that inner stability and meaning in their lives.
well, they put on a
Yeah.
good show highlighting their own personal power skills that they believe that others do not have and spiritual experiences that they think separate them from other people. Simultaneously, there are a lot of people who are attracted to those kinds of individuals and formats, not particularly different from anything in the past, but it's important to bring this up because it is going to be part of the problems.
One of the things to be aware of is that with the online presence and even AI, there really is a great danger for these false prophets, gurus, teachers to start gaining more notoriety and more attention.
Well, there are a lot of them online today. I mean, I would dare say probably even
But
in the hundreds.
that's really one of the reasons why we have to begin this inward journey instead of continuing to seek for the answers out there in the world. And in some ways it's really simple, but I don't think it's easy because there is all the noise out there. But it's also exciting because of how much we can learn and how quickly we can start this transformation experience within ourselves because it's not dependent on anything outside.
Let's practice what we're teaching. I want to share, I can make this brief. I won't tell the whole story, but I want to share about a moment in my life. I was 27 years old, and I had my very first professional performance evaluation. And it was with Dr. Ron Gilliard, a man that would play a transformational role in my life. But this was going to be the confrontation that would get me on that path. And I was really looking forward to the performance evaluation and talking with him because I knew how great I was. I believe that, just like some of the characteristics that we just read about false teachers, I thought I was better than other people. I thought I knew more about learning and teaching than other people, even though I was only 27 years old, but was operating out of my ego. And so I thought the performance evaluation was going to reveal the treasure that I was.
But you were doing a lot of things well, creativity and all those things, and so
Well,
but I
that,
understand what you're saying about the ego kicking in because I had the same experience when I was a young teacher.
at that time, I don't know what's happened since then, but you were required by law to sign off on the evaluation. So I was really looking forward to it. But he didn't come by my room. I mean, he had come to the classroom, did the evaluation, but I didn't hear from him for several days, which I thought was unusual. So I went to find him and said, when do you want to go for the evaluation? And he looked at me and he said, I don't know if I want to. And it kind of took
Uh-oh.
me back. I don't realize yet that something is wrong. But he looks at me and says, I tell you what, he said, let me think about it tonight and I'll come down to your room tomorrow and talk to you. So the next day he comes down and he says, okay, Hayden, here's the deal. We're going to do the performance evaluation, but under one condition. And the condition is that you are not allowed to speak. And then I knew something's wrong, but how could that involve me? Because, I was so good at what I did. So I went to his office the next day and sat down. He reminded me of the rule and he looked at me, and you never forget these things. And he looked at me and he said, and I quote, Hayden, you are not who you think you are. And for 45 minutes, he took me apart. I was on the verge of tears within the first 10 minutes. It was like I was in a state of shock. Suffice it to say, what would happen to me over the course of the next 2 months would be a transformational moment in my life of how I began to change, how I began to view myself, how I began to take responsibility for the mistakes that I had made. But my point about that is weighing in and saying, I know a lot about being a false teacher because when I was very young, I think that's what I was. I operated out of my ego, but I didn't know any better. But thank goodness, we are all so lucky when someone takes the time, has an interest in us, maybe even loves us, and takes the time to look at us in the eye and share the truth with us that we need to hear. And this is what the middle zone is going to be about. There's a truth that we need to hear in order to move out of the age of
And
ignorance.
that we need to acknowledge.
Right, exactly. So, I can say with the utmost sincerity that it's better to be alone than to be in a group of people that's being led by somebody operating out of the ego. I think the other thing that I want to say, which Terry, you've already brought up once, is this issue of your intuition. Now, in a little bit, we are going to define this as authoritative discernment. But for right now, just for the moment, of being willing to trust your gut. Either way, whether it's a substantial opportunity or it's a situation you should avoid, but to begin to learn to trust yourself because there will be those individuals who will prove to be significant guides on this path. And they're very likely to come across as being very transparent, just maintaining a sense of calm about things, not telling anybody what to do, not requiring anything from anybody, but they have an ability to address the cause and not just the symptom. And without question, I think that a lot of these people who are emerging today, they're not going to be interested in the glitter or the notoriety, but are dedicated to the mission of the works. For the moment, be on your toes, be discerning.
Hayden, you and I have talked about self-awareness being a prerequisite or a stepping stone to consciousness, and you've said many times that consciousness picks up where everything else leaves off.
And I mean that. And when I say it picks up where everything leaves off, I'm talking about mindfulness, meditation, breath work, therapy of all kinds, healing platforms of all kinds, and I could go on. And it's not that they do not have their value and their place in this process, but they are not connected to consciousness. And I will define that in just a second as to why they're
And
not.
it's not to come across as...
I don't want to come
Oh, yeah.
across as arrogant or dismissive, but it has to be said. We are in a transition period, and where we are moving is not just a modification of the old. We are moving into a new reality that is available to us.
And that's really the purpose of the collapse that we're seeing.
To realize that we don't know anything, and how wonderful it is to get to that place where you realize you don't know anything.
And I know that's true in regards to existence. I know a lot about my experiences. I know a lot about what I can and can't do, for example, even the thought that there's so much going on beyond what we can see, beyond what we can even fathom, that can feel, even for the moment, just enormous. Like, this isn't just this lifetime, this personality, this time and space, but there's a continuity to everything, and it can be overwhelming. I mean, it can be wonderful to think that this is part of a really well drawn out and evolving process, but it also can be a little bit scary.
The most discerning element that I really want to highlight and emphasize, the most discerning element of future transformation as we know it, is going to be what I refer to as the element of the transcendent. And by that, what I mean is that unless the transcendent you could say your psychic being, your soul, unless the transcendent you is the reference point, your higher being, the journey of your soul.
The eternal part of you.
The eternal part, the illumined mind, the intuitive mind, the overmind. I really wonder how much progress that we're going to be able to make anymore, because now it's gone beyond self-awareness. And if you don't understand these things, if you don't understand your existence, then it's impossible to understand your experiences, much less what you're doing here as a human being. And that includes not really being able to understand your childhood, your past, your addictive behaviors. It's not that these former practices did not play their part. I participated in many of them over the years, but they didn't have transformation as the goal, because the transformation was focused on the mind, not the transcendent part of you. And so, because of that, it doesn't contain the answers that we're seeking, because it doesn't contain the path to the transcendent, which is what the middle zone is all about.
So really, this movement is not just the mind, although the mind's always going to be involved, but it's really paying attention to the soul, as you said, the transcendent, the eternal part of ourselves, and our purpose of being here, not just our purpose of doing what we do.
It's not just the focus on the transcendent. It is becoming the transcendent within. And that is what consciousness is. Consciousness, defined perfectly well for the individual, is the truth of who you are that's working its way out through who you are not. Said a different way, it's just unconsciousness evolving to consciousness.
The evolutionary process begins with the individual, with pioneers, and maybe you'll be one of those pioneers who begin to create this path of inner awakening and discovery of the truth of your existence, and to throw the pebbles out to show other people how to cross the path, how to cross the bridge as well. And what qualifies the pioneers of tomorrow, of people leading into the middle zone, is not going to be degrees or certificates. They're not going to get a certificate that says you're now ready. It's not going to be about the intellect or
You're now
the
qualified.
yeah, right, to be a pioneer. But it is going to come from this wisdom and knowledge that's gained from the courage and perseverance of walking a journey based on your inner self, on your psychic being, on the truth of who you are. And if you wait for the outer to dictate that journey, you're just being pulled along in the direction of the group, the collective. And there's a lot of stress and anxiety and dysfunction in that process. The transformation we're speaking about is a transformation of conscious growth, not growth that's born out of suffering and just the conspiracies of circumstances like we talked about in the last podcast. If we as a humanity don't understand this, why the events are happening as they are, and we just wait for the outer to resolve itself, we wait for someone to show up and do something, then we're only prolonging the chaos and the suffering.
And this is really what the middle zone is for. It's time for preparation. It's time to become a student of your life. It's time for you to begin to deeply reflect upon the meaning and existence of your life and why you are here. In other words, it's time for the inward journey to begin. And, as Terry said, perhaps you will be one of the pioneers that begin to forge this path. But it's not going to be about institutions and politics and clubs and organizations, but is going to be based upon individual transformation. And that's a big shift from the past and how knowledge has been organized.
So let's go ahead and get to the heart of being a pioneer, to the middle zone.
I'm up for that.
And we can look at it 2 levels. One, we really have to upgrade the hardware, our internal machinery, the way that we perceive and the way that we go about learning and working through this. We have to get an upgrade. And we also have to create, well, you don't have to do anything, but it'd be helpful to create an umbilical cord to the divine, to the
Transcendent.
Yeah, to your soul, so that you can begin not only this journey for yourself, but to serve as a bridge for others as well.
But it's not about notoriety. It's not about building skyscrapers. It's about the spiritualization of your own individual life. I have known the deepest of the dark nights of the soul in my life, in which I thought I was going to die, but in fact, I was being born. But I didn't know it. And there were times in my life.
And it didn't feel like it.
And it didn't feel like it. You're not aware that it's happening. And I have also experienced significant, tremendous successes that I've had in my life, only to find out when I got to the mountaintop that I didn't know anything. I thought I did, but it turned out that I really didn't know anything. So what we are witness to is the realization that we are something more than who we think we are. You, the individual, you are a spark of the divine. I will go so far as to say it and say you are God. You're not the God, but you are God in physical form, and you don't know that, and neither do I, and neither does Terry. We are all on this journey, in this transition to the next level. So we're going to have to upgrade the hardware before we can make any real conscious, deliberate, intentional progress.
And it's also true. It's about moving from knowing that I'm the spark of the divine, which most people that I talk to would say that they believe that, or that I'm made in the image of the divine, rather than just knowing it, to actually being that in my life. And it's not, I don't mean it like a holier than thou thing. It's just being the truth of who I am, and you being the truth of who you are. It's like Sri Aurobindo said, I, ignorant, am the knower beyond time.
Translated a little differently, I, the idiot, am of God.
Or
You know,
I know I'm an idiot, and at the same time, I know everything.
well, these are the two worlds in which we live, and essentially, and it's so simple, it is not complicated. It's when the understanding of existence begins to merge with the experience, the spiritualization of your life begins to take place. But right now, we don't have a lot of understanding of what consciousness is. So let's take some steps here. Let's look at some strategies about how to upgrade the software, and then we'll talk about connecting the umbilical cord to the higher parts of ourselves, to the transcendent, to God.
So, Hayden, let's go ahead and look at 5 ways that we can upgrade the software, that we can upgrade our ability to be that which we really are
Only
instead of
five?
just knowing it. Yeah, we're gonna limit it to
Five will
5.
be a good start.
Yeah.
So, in order to upgrade the hardware, the first suggestion that we want to share with you, a word that I hinted at earlier, is cultivate authoritative discernment. Because the middle zone is going to be full of solutions from the past that didn't work before, teachers and practices that are ego driven, the pioneer of tomorrow, you've got to develop a strong discernment about what is real and what is not real. Look behind the curtain. See beyond the physical. Oz is not the imperial god that he pretends to be. Be discerning to a fault. And if it does not address the transcendent within you, the spiritual path to awakening, then, as I said before, better to spend time in the quiet of your mind or training your mind to be quiet.
And I think this is, we
Trust
can say
yourself.
it's right, it can be really difficult because there's so much addiction of the mind to all the chaos and drama and noise. So number 2 is to practice equality. So don't be bothered by all the chaos of the age of ignorance. Do the best you can to
Or the middle zone. There will
Right,
be a
it's
lot of
for you.
chaos in the middle zone.
Do your best to remain unbothered, not just by the chaos or the noise that you see in the outer world, but by your own success or failure. To not have a preference for, and I think that's quite a challenge to understand that success and failure, pleasure and pain, praise or criticism are all part of our evolutionary process, and to practice equality, even though I admit I like validation better than I like criticism, but to be able to see both of them as part of the process. And when you are around those who argue for the old ways, just practice being, or even when your own mind starts arguing for the old ways, just practice being an observer of what's outside of you and what's inside of you. It's like being at the movies.
It's like watching in the scene where Darth Vader kills Obi-Wan. You know Obi-Wan's getting ready to die, but you're not particularly upset about it because it's a movie. You know he's going to be okay, and particularly when you see him smiling as he surrenders to death and to the forces that be, because he knows that's his role. We are able to do the same thing. And I am absolutely suggesting that you know this. You have learned that through your failures, that your life expanded. You have learned that through your successes that you actually hurt yourself in different ways. That what you thought the glitter was going to save you from this or that, and it didn't. You have learned these things. You know these things. And now we have to start consolidating them into a path in life.
Our third suggestion for upgrading your hardware is to learn to detach. So we don't have the luxury of sitting around and waiting for the outer world to correct itself. It is just not going to happen. That is not the path it's on. And as often as you can, even when you're in the middle of the mess, whether it's in a relationship or you're just watching all of the things going on around you and in the world, just step back, then step back again, and maybe even be as far away as the moon. Place your awareness on the moon and simply watch what is going on, but without judgment. Again, we're practicing equality. In other words, detach from all the drama in your life. It doesn't mean you don't care about people or you don't care about yourself, but be on the moon, watching the drama, but without feeling the need to involve yourself in all of the drama. Everyone's doing the best they can with what they know.
And it's so easy to say that, as has been spoken about in every Eastern text from the beginning of time, this issue of detaching. So whatever issues you have in making progress with detaching, it's okay. That's a good problem to have. The next one that we want to talk about, number 4 of 5, is shifting from surviving to aligning with. Shift from reacting to acting. In other words, instead of responding endlessly to these outer stimuli in your life, all of the drama at work and at home, respond to and just seek inner guidance. Shift from trying to figure out the best move to make to moving into your intuition and living out as best you can the dictates of your inner being and your soul.
Is this in alignment with
And
how I truly want to experience myself?
being in alignment as best you can with the transcendent within. And that's not going to look pretty in the beginning. It takes practice. It is a disciplined path. And lastly, and to me, this is the most important of the ones that we mentioned here, is shifting from the fear of the future to the absolute confidence in the divine and knowing that whatever it is that happens is supposed to happen, even if your mind cannot understand or accept that. And that goes back to letting go. That goes back to aligning. That goes back to practicing equality, of knowing that everything is purposeful, even when your mind can't understand that.
And in shifting from surviving to aligning, number one, none of us is going to survive, so we might as well shift to the aligning part. But a question that's helped me and been kind of guiding light for me has been, how do I want to experience myself? And sometimes, as you said, that's messy. People don't like it when you choose that and you're not going along with the crowd, for example, but you choose a behavior, response, and action that is in alignment with who you truly are, not just with kind of the status quo or of how things have been. And then that leads us to our 5th suggestion, is to learn to develop a unified perception. And this kind of brings all 5 of them together.
See everything as being absolutely interconnected.
It's training your mind, it's practicing, it's overriding. It's really inviting your mind to see a unified world, each being doing the best they can with what they know. And that's the truth.
And the unified perception also includes seeing, as impossible as it is, seeing the relationship between you and those that have hurt you.
Each
Of what was the role of that? Why did that occur in my life? Why did I call that forth? And this is part of developing that unified perception.
Well, each event, each person does contribute to the great unfolding of your life and of the great unfolding of the whole unfolding. So unify.
And begin to teach yourself to see the world that way. All is one and one is all. And here's the catch, even when it breaks your heart. How can it not be heartbreaking to see what we are doing today, of looking at the ignorance that is creating so much suffering in the world? And yet we must bear that.
So let's just summarize, Hayden, these 5 ways of updating our hardware. Number 1, cultivate authoritative discernment. Trust yourself. Number 2, practice equality of ups and downs, good and bad. Number 3, learn to detach, observe. Number 4, make the shift from surviving to aligning. And number 5, through all of this, develop a unified perception.
As we practice these strategies, we will be in the process of creating an umbilical cord to the transcendent within, to the higher parts of ourselves, to God, to the divine. And this is one of the most important things that we can do. This is the spiritual technology that we referred to in the episode discussing the age of ignorance. But the question is, how to do that. And so there are significant steps that we can take to begin to practice. They're found in some of these strategies that we've discussed. But the first step in creating an umbilical cord to the higher part of yourself is aspiration. Aspiration is not desire. aspiration is not connected to your emotional needs and desires, then I'm not saying there's anything wrong with those. To want a new home, to want a car that doesn't break down every month. But this is not about the physical needs. This is not about surviving. Aspiration is the upward call. It's not a wish. It's not a hope. It is a focused intention. It is a constant will for the divine, for God, for truth to take over your life. It's a choice to know your soul, to fulfill your destiny of why you took birth. It doesn't necessarily take that long. You'll have the experience of it replacing your mind's constant meanderings and wanderings and attachments that create so much wasted time and suffering in your life. Aspire to become the truth of who and what you are. Aspire to rise above the limitations of your past. Aspire to become you. And the beautiful thing about aspiration is you don't have to know how. It knows how. It is the aspiration that is an umbilical cord that begins to connect you to that knowing.
It's the choosing what to aspire toward. And aspiration's often seen as going up, like it's a vertical movement. And it's out of body or it dismisses the physical, but that's not what we're talking about. It's not an escape from the physical world. In addition to the aspiration of seeking to become the truth of who you are, you can also aspire to bring the light down.
To bring knowledge down.
Right. Clarity into the world. And of course, invite the higher consciousness into the crazy parts of your life, into your frustrations of your everyday life, into your fears, into your worries, into your self-doubt, into the pain of your life. But don't forget, in bringing this life down, that you're also engaging with other people from this light, from this higher part of yourself. And so there is an up and a down of aspiration. I was at a doctor's appointment the other day and waiting for my time. And so I decided it was a good time to practice aspiring to have the truth, So I was sitting there in the waiting room and opening my mind. I was picturing like the top of my head kind of opening to receive. And I was amazed at the resistance I had to that. My mind was like, "What in the world?"
This is
Just
stupid.
just go back and look at your phone and all the crazy stuff you
Right,
can read
exactly.
about while you
Hey,
wait.
what's the weather going to be tomorrow? How many emails do I have? Oh my God, I just got another text message I've got to answer.
So this aspiration, umbilical cord to the divine, the next piece of that again, we're just trying to be real and say that it's not this angel
Can I
singing.
go back just for a second? So what you said, I want to see if I can summarize a little bit here in saying, yes, there is the ascent, but there is the descent. And let's combine both. It's not just being in the physical, it's bringing the metaphysical or the spiritual down into your life at the same time that you are aspiring upward to become the truth of who and what you are.
And I think when it feels messy, when it feels difficult, when there's resistance to the aspiration, whether it's ascending or descending, then the practice is to surrender, to let go. And this isn't giving up or giving in. It's just doing your very best again to be in alignment with your inner truth. To try again, if I open my mind to the truth and I want to be a conduit of light on the planet and I feel resistance, that's okay. Just try to breathe, relax, let go, and open up again.
And if the day ever comes that I achieve that I acquire that level of consciousness, I intend to put a really big sign in front of the office that says, I have finally surrendered. But as much as I practice that, I'm not there yet. Surrender, it could be a 5-day workshop. It's a trilogy of books. Surrender is part of that development of the umbilical cord. But it's not easy because you're going to have to figure out how to go beyond your mind that argues for all of the limitations and without including surrender in it. So one of the things that we are going to witness in this movement from the age of ignorance to the middle zone is we're going to be witness to an incredible increase of individual efforts that will serve the spiritual growth of mankind through one's everyday, ordinary life.
It's like our Mother Teresa said, "Don't worry about doing great things. Just do little things with great love."
This is what the middle zone is going to embody. These efforts are not going to be linked to clubs and politics and organizations, but they will be born out of the individual's everyday life and how the individual begins to demonstrate that increase of, you could say, the spiritual or wisdom or truth in their everyday life. I remember probably 10, 12 years ago, I was at a McDonald's really early in the morning. Terry and I were working out of town, and I ran down to McDonald's to get something to eat. And as soon as I walk in, you could hear the door ding, alerting staff, that somebody was coming in. Weren't a whole lot of people there because it was early in the morning. And as soon as I walked in, I saw this old man behind the counter. His back was turned to me. My first reaction was one of judgment, how sad it is that this old man has to work here. I figured he's at least 80 years old. He had begun to shrink. But, it's not like I was tapping into compassion yet, but, I was just going, oh my, this must be difficult for him. And as I was walking toward the counter, he turned, he looked me dead in the eye. I'm probably 10 feet from the counter. He looks me in the eye. His arms extend as though he wants to embrace me. And as I get close to the counter, his arms are out and he looks at me and he says, and I quote again, these moments are transformational, you remember. And he looks at me and he says, and I quote, "Welcome, my brother. What can I get you to eat?" And I realized that I was in the presence of one of these people, a human being that had transcended the mind, who was operating out of that spirituality in the most ordinary of circumstances, and how his presence affected me so deeply, of even saying to myself, I want to be like that, when I grow up. With this in mind, this last part of connecting the umbilical cord is we invite you to aspire to be an instrument of the divine, an instrument of the middle zone. You don't have to know how it's going to happen. You don't have to know what it's going to have to look like. All you have to do is aspire.
And maybe no one else will even see you doing it.
Right. And that doesn't matter because the impact will be there. This is not about the old spiritual past. You don't have to wear a loincloth. You don't have to go without. As I've said before, this is a merging of the physical and the spiritual. It is the spiritualization of the material. You don't have to give up anything. Just simply aspire to be an instrument of love, of growth, of compassion, of sincerity in the world. Let my life be a testament of the transcendent that lies inside of me. And simply just let go, and it'll take over. It eventually will guide you along that path. So let's summarize what we did and what we said in terms of reconfiguring the hardware and creating an umbilical cord.
Yep, just to leave them with you so that you have these to take forward. We have discernment, practicing equality, shifting from surviving to aligning, having a unified perception, aspiration, aspiring, surrender, and being an instrument of the divine.
And notice that all these are invisible. They're not really behaviors. They are conditions of the mind, but the higher mind that we want to focus on. So I want to remind all of us that as we move from the age of ignorance, assuming that we do move from the age of ignorance to the middle zone, that no one is going to be spared, but no one is going to be left out. You were born for this. This is why you took birth, to be part of this magnificent journey that we are now all on.
And you're not just a spectator of the collapse, and that's so important. I'm not just a spectator of the collapse. You are a pioneer of the arrival of the new beginning. Stop just moving the furniture around in the dark, of doing the same old, same old. Be the light that reveals the room. And remember, everything you seek is that which you already are.
And that is the journey that is getting ready to appear before us in the movement from ignorance into the middle zone. So thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you joining us in this episode.
If this is a meaningful resource to you, consider joining our online project, which is called Becoming You Journey. And you can find that on our website, truthspringasheville.com. Asheville is Asheville. Also on that website, right in the center, you can check out our workshop that we're going to have at the Omega Institute, July 1st through August 2nd, up in Rhinebeck, New York. We're very excited about joining with Omega on their campus for this work and would love to see you there. Also, here in Asheville, we have live in-person workshops, we have virtual workshops, we have individual coaching, and we look forward to a chance to work with you and meet you.
Thank you so much.